Hey guys, welcome to Morning Glory Farmstead. My name is Lolly and this channel is all about gardening, animals, and nature. These are a few of my dogs, and I'm kind of sitting down here at the end where George is, and so they're all trying to get as close as possible. And so look, there's part of the couch that's not even being used, but they've kind of cramped together on one side. Y'all check out my GREENSTALK link in the description box. You can use that and the code LOLLY10 to get 10 bucks off your order. You guys, the majority of this video was actually done several months ago, but there were some issues with the music being too loud and covering up my voice. So this was some feedback that you guys gave me. So I am redoing it. And the part where I'm giving you my best tips and tricks will not have any music so that you can hear me loud and clear. I hope this helps. Today, I am super excited to give you some of my top tips to help you be a success when using your GREENSTALK garden. Now, these are some things to keep in mind whether you've already used a GREENSTALK garden or maybe you're just thinking about getting one or you're kind of a beginner. These are some great strategies and tips to help you get set up for success right from the beginning. So today, I have my short garlic GREENSTALK. So it's only got 4 tiers. I put it together. It's part of my strategy. We'll see how that turns out in the spring, but I'm going to use this for my demo today. Number 1 is going to be spacing. Think about where you're going to put your GREENSTALK garden and think about how much space you have. And the reason I say that is because even though the GREENSTALK itself, let's look at that, is only about 19 inches from one side to the other. If you have any vining plants or vegetables or flowers that need support, you're gonna have to add these supports to the side. When you add the supports, that's gonna make it about 3 feet all the way around, okay? So you're gonna need to be able to move it without it bumping into things. And I learned that this is important because I have 5 GREENSTALKs on my patio, and as I started adding all of the supports, the amount of room I had to maneuver on my patio started getting more limited. So that's number 1, thinking about how much space you actually have in case you want to have more than one GREENSTALK. And I have a feeling you will once you start using them and seeing how well they work. You might want to add on. Number 2 is going to be sunlight. You want to have about 6 hours of direct sunlight each day for each GREENSTALK garden. You want to make sure that you don't get much less than that, okay? There could be shadows that are cast from your house or from various trees around your property and things like that. So just take a good look at where you're putting it ahead of time and make sure you've got plenty of sunlight. Now, I actually had too much sun and I would have to move mine to get them in a shaded area of the patio throughout the day. However, after Hurricane Ian, there is a huge tree in my yard that is leaning, and so it's actually casting too much shade on my patio throughout the day. And so I'm actually going to have to take all of my GREENSTALKs off of my patio and maybe put them in my driveway somewhere or a different area around the house to make sure that they get that 6 hours of full sun. So if the habitat changes around you, you may have to alter your plans just a little bit. All right, number 3 is going to be spinning and rotating your GREENSTALK. Even if you have an area that gets full sun, there's going to be a part of your GREENSTALK that doesn't get sun. There's always going to be a backside or somewhere on the side that's in a shaded area, and so it's really helpful just to rotate it once a day if you can. So I usually rotate mine after a few hours just to give it a little bit more sunlight. Now, if there's times that I forget to rotate my green stalk during a day, what I do is I go ahead and I come out in the evening when I remember, and I go ahead and rotate it so that the next morning when the sun comes up, it's already been rotated and I don't have to worry about it for a while. So just rotate it if you can. So if you're not home to where you can rotate it halfway through the day, I would just suggest rotating it every day so that the same area is not always getting the shade or the same area is not getting too much sun, okay? Now you also want to think about where you're putting it if you have animals. Now I have all my green stalks on my patio, which I really call the catio because that's where all my cats hang out. And I can't have plants in the inside of my home because my cats will eat them all. And I was kind of worried about the green stalk. They did pretty well, but I do joke and say that my plants got cat disease because they like to chew on the leaves of the vegetables on the bottom tier. So overall, I would say they did really well. They disciplined themselves by not eating the whole green stalk, but they did chew on some of the leaves at the bottom. And occasionally I did find a cat sitting in the top of the green stalk on the top tier. So if you have cats, you might want to think about where you're placing these. All right, number 5 is going to be thinking about the types of amendments that you want to add to your potting soil or your potting mix. Not all of them want extra potassium or phosphate, so you want to keep that in mind. If you have plants that need nitrogen and others that don't, and you want to put them in the same green stalk, it's really good to strategize about placement. So if I know that I have certain plants that need nitrogen and others that don't, I'm going to put those plants on the bottom, okay? That way when I'm watering and the water is going through the soil that has the nitrogen, it's not going to wash it into the ones that I have up at the top, okay? You want to strategize about where you put certain vegetables or plants. All right, the next thing that you want to think about is what you're growing that may need support. Now, you can see from this one, even though it's a short one here, if I have tall things growing on the top, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to use the supports, okay? So if I have vining things like tomatoes or other things like that, you'll want to put some supports down here so that as they grow up, they're supported here, okay? So it's a little bit more difficult to support things up at the top unless you rig it with something you have. So I would put the shorter items on the top and maybe some of the taller vining things at the bottom. Remember, if you're growing tomatoes, you can put those lower on the green stalk because if you're one that likes to prune some of those stems off in the lower half or near the base, that's going to free up some space, right? So you're going to get sunlight to those other plants. So you can mix things in. But in general, I grow things on the top that aren't going to grow super tall and need a ton of support. Okay, now to get the best use of the patented watering system that comes with the GREENSTALK Vertical Planter, you want to make sure that your green stalk is on a level surface. If you're putting your vertical planter on the ground where there's grass or dirt, that's going to be easier to build up to make it even. If you're on a concrete foundation, you're going to have to find just the right thickness, whether it's a board, a tile, or something like that to make it even. And in order to check whether or not it's even, just grab yourself a level and lay it right on top. And then you can just adjust it accordingly until the level shows that you're on a level surface. So because I keep my green stalks on cement, I have the base that spins and has wheels. So I can just roll it around wherever I need to. If you're going to be in the grass or on the dirt with your green stalk, then you may just need the spinning base that sits flat without the wheels. And again, if you're going to be on the grass or the dirt, it's a lot easier to level it with just the flat base that spins without the wheels. You can just stick something up under it to kind of leverage it up on one side or the other until it's level. All right, next you want to think about watering. Don't forget to water your plants. We all know that plants need to be watered, but sometimes I think green stalks get a little bit neglected because when you plant things in the ground, they can go a little bit longer between waterings, but these green stalks actually dry out quicker, so you need to water more frequently. So just remember that the green stalk containers dry out faster than being in ground, okay? They're more susceptible to heat drying it out because they're above ground, and also there's a lot more wind, right, that hits these green stalks throughout the day. So water these frequently. Always make sure that you've got the appropriate amount of water for whatever you're growing. Now, I know I've talked about this in other videos, but it's definitely worth repeating in case some of you didn't watch those. You want to use potting soil or potting mix, okay? That's different than the soil that you would put in the garden in the ground. So find some potting mix or potting soil, and then if you need to, add the appropriate amendments like your potash, your phosphate, and your nitrogen. You also want to keep in mind what kind of GreenStalk garden you're using. Are you using the leaf planter or the original? Remember, in my other video, I talked about the different sizes, okay? So some plants and vegetables are going to do really well, like greens go really well in the leaf because it's shallow. But some plants and vegetables are going to need more room to grow deeper roots. And so in that case, you'd want to use the original planter. So when you're starting to plant, think about how much room you actually need in the GreenStalk. So here you can see that the green leaf planter is a lot more shallow than the original terracotta planter. So I would want to put my vegetables and plants that had more shallow root systems in the leaf planter. Now, of course, if you want to get the original, you can plant anything in the original that you can use for the leaf planter because it's deeper. So if you're looking to just buy one to start out, you might want to start out with the original. So something else to think about is, what are you going to do if a really bad storm comes? Now, for me personally, I just roll them up against the house as close as I can get them. Now, if they've got the supports sticking out on the sides, that makes it a little more difficult to get right up next to the house. But if I need to, I can take a few of the supports off temporarily and just make sure I'm really gentle with the vines. Or if you don't have vining plants that are all kind of hooked together, you can just take the tiers apart. Just lift them off, set them on the ground. I have heard stories of other people losing their GreenStalk garden plants in a really bad storm that had really heavy winds. I've never experienced that, and I've been through some pretty bad storms with even some trees down. As long as I put them up against the house, they seem to do okay. But if you've got it out in the open somewhere and you can't just roll it up against the house, I would at least maybe try to put them on the ground, just separate them, and maybe even put some type of cover over them temporarily. Now, I've already had a few nights here that were below freezing, so the next thing you want to think about is how you're going to cover them. Now, I have covers for all my GreenStalks that I got from the GreenStalk company, and there's two different kinds. They have some that are just to keep the bugs off the plants that allow about 80% of the sunlight through, but there's also some that are made to protect from the frost. And because I have some really young greens growing and my giant noble spinach is just kind of poking its head out pretty good, I went ahead and used those covers. Now, so far, everything looks good. They were a little bit sad the next couple mornings, but it doesn't look like anything has actually died yet. So super grateful for that. So they have time to get a little bit bigger and a little more hardy. You guys can either do this or not, but I think that where you get your seeds is also important. I know that in starting out, I bought some seeds that were organic, but from this particular company, they really didn't germinate very well. I didn't have great seedlings or anything like that. Whereas some of my other ones, I had no issues. I got fantastic results. So do some research about what you think are some good reputable companies to buy your seeds from. Now, if you're prepping or things get really hard, then of course just buy seeds where you can. You're probably going to have some that germinate well. If you want really good results, I would buy some from some reputable companies. Now, I try to buy all organic when I can, simply for health reasons. But if you can't get your hands on some of those, then just do the best that you can. I know I brought this up in another video as well, but I want to reiterate to make sure you try to find the placement for your GreenStalks before you add the soil and especially the water. You guys, once you add the water, it'll be really heavy for a day or two, a little bit harder to lift and a little bit harder to push around. So it's just strategic to figure out that placement before you add that weight. Now, my last tip is to have fun while you're doing this, okay? Don't be afraid to experiment a little bit just to see what happens, to see if you can grow something that you've always wanted to try. And also invite family and friends into this experience. Children and grandchildren find this really fun. And even adults who have never really grown anything can't believe that they have actually helped sow a seed that's producing a vegetable that you can then put on the table. I hope you guys found these tips super helpful. Leave some comments below if you have some additional tips. I'm sure I didn't hit everything, and I'd like to create a community where everybody is talking about the GreenStalks, what they're growing, how it's going, mistakes they've made, lessons they've learned, so that we can all do a better job at sustaining and at least sourcing some of our food for ourselves at home. All right, I'll see you in the next video where I'm going to do the sweet potato reveal. Until then, you guys have a great couple of days. Bye-bye.